Ja nyt näemme, missä ollaan. Pääsimme ponnistamaan eteenpäin ohjelmassa. Meillä on vuorossa kansainvälinen keynote speaker, Deputy Chief Executive Officer Tim Albertsen. Our guest is international in so many ways. He is Danish of origin and has been in Paris for 10 years. I love Paris. In ALD, he looks after the Nordic region, Benelux region, UK, interesting these days, Ireland, Germany, India, China and Southeast Asia. He supervises and sponsors a fair deal of ALD's strategic projects, the global remarketing function and the global procurement function. I've been told that your favorite method of transportation is running. You do half marathons from time to time. But what I find particularly interesting is that you love cooking and French wines. Soon enough it will be weekend again and many of us will be cooking, or at least hope we're cooking. What is your specialty and what kind of wine would you serve with it?
Right, yeah, well, first of all, my favorite transportation mean is not running. It is actually a car still. So, but it's true, I do a bit of running. So but that's important to state, I guess, in this forum. And I would say, cooking, I normally do fish, and I'm well known for my fish sauce, and that's probably what I'm gonna do for the weekend as well. And I guess all the world loves French wine, so there's nothing particular to that. But I would serve typically, actually, normally you would take white wine for fish, but I like a light red wine, which would be normally a Bourgogne, maybe a Pommard or a Sauternes or something like that.
Sounds delicious. Of course, we look forward to the weekend, but most of all, we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Kiitos. I don't know what actually what Pekka told you, because I have no clue in Finnish, what's going on, but I'm sure it was a good story, and it is a very good story, and thanks a lot for being here today. Fantastic day, celebrating 40 years of very good business in Finland, where we have served many, many clients and partners. And it seems to be the season for anniversaries these days, because within a month, we have had 3 anniversaries, 20 years in Norway, 20 years in Sweden, and now 40 years in Finland. What an achievement for a region, basically. And it's also interesting to see the difference between the people in the Nordics, because in Norway they had organized an event like this and a party in the evening. That was great. In Sweden they had organized a party for all the employees, nothing for the clients. And here we just have a professional event in Finland. I thought you were much more fun in Finland, actually, so I'm a bit surprised. Huh? But anyhow, that's great and good to be here. I would say, 40 years, it was our first subsidiary in the Nordics, and I would say from the very beginning have always been a model for what we want to do in the group of ALD. ALD is 43 countries today. We are a group of, we have 1.7 million cars driving around, and 6,000 employees, and well, have today become something completely different than just 20 years ago, of course. But Finland was, when I joined actually the group to start ALD Denmark in 1997. And my boss was Finnish, Erkki Laine, maybe somebody remembers, a fantastic guy who have set up a very nice business here in Finland that was already at those days, like we are today, very innovative, seeing customer-centric, and actually a very profitable business as well, which is good for shareholders. But overall, very focused on the customers and the needs of the market. And that model have then become the model for the Nordics, and we have actually adopted a lot of the things we do in the Nordics into our different countries in Europe today. So ALD Finland has a real footprint in what we're doing all over the place here. So I've been asked here today to tell you a bit about the future trends, what is going on in terms of the transformation of the automotive space and the mobility space in particular. And I'll start by sharing a few very few words about the megatrends, because this is what is actually, let's say, having an impact of our daily lives. The last 5-10 years, we have actually been, let's say, touched of these megatrends, the digital lifestyle, the urbanization, I mean, the sharing economy, and the millennials that's coming to the work market and becoming customers. All that, of course, have a big impact on all businesses today. It changes business models and have an impact on our personal life on a daily basis as well. And I guess you're all familiar with this, so I will not spend too much time on that, but what I would like to spend a bit more time is potentially what they call the case transformation, which is what really will impact the automotive sector in the next 5 to 10 years. And CASE stands for the connected car, the autonomous driving, the shared vehicles, and the electrification of fleets. And that's, let's say, big things that is to some extent clearly changing the way we're going to consume our mobility, at least when it comes to cars, in the next 5 to 10 years, quite dramatically. When you take connected cars, it's not just about getting data out of the cars. Clearly, you know, the connected car have actually enabled a lot of the car sharing issues. The seamless travel you can do in cars, going in and out of a car, find the car, drive the car, get the invoice out. All that is, of course, based on the fact that the car is connected. Otherwise, it's not feasible. But more than that, and of course, for a business like ours, when you connect the car, we can actually manage the car, we can manage our assets much more efficient, and therefore actually become a plus for you as our clients. But what is potentially much more interesting and important, especially for the manufacturers and for Google and Apple, is that the cars will get connected, and we as consumers will actually start consume a lot of products and services while we're in the cars. And that's, as you can see, that's a market estimated of $77 billion by 2030, which is a lot of money and very interesting for, I mean, everybody in that space. When we talk about autonomous vehicles, that's the revolution by far. It will completely change the way we see our business models be today. So it's a bit apart. The question is still when. I think everybody thinks it will happen, but there's a lot of technical challenges, there's legal challenges, there's ethical challenges still to be solved. And is it 2025? Is it 2030? Is it everywhere at any time? Well, we'll see, but it's going to be a big change to, again, how we actually consume our mobility going forward. Sharing, you know, when you go to any city today, you see free-floating car sharing programs everywhere. You see corporate car sharing coming up. There's none of these models that is actually profitable today, to be very frank, if you actually calculate the right way, at least. But it's there for good. It's a very important part of this new mobility space. And there's a lot of money being invested into the space to actually prune it and actually develop it over the next years. And as you can see, the market is moving not just on the consumer car sharing, but also on the corporate car sharing. And the last bit, I will not touch a lot upon, which is the electrification, because Stefan will actually take you through our whole program around that. I think electrification seems to be, I mean, the play to actually reduce pollution in the cities. It may be not, let's say, reducing the CO2 emissions and the NOx emissions the NOx emission, because there's none, but the CO2 emissions right away. But what it does is it actually takes at least the pollution out of the cities, because where they produce the batteries, where they produce the cars, is not necessarily in the city centers. And when they drive in the city centers, there is no CO2 emission. So that's an important part of that. And these four things, I guess, is moving, and actually there's a big interaction between those four things. They help each other. They actually speed up the transformation as they move along. So going from, let's say, 5 years ago, where we talked about these things, but nothing really happened, to today, where we start seeing that it is actually starting moving, and we'll see that development going exponential in the next years. So I think there's a very good consensus that this will happen. This is the way that it's going to look like in, let's say, maybe 5, 10, or 15 years from now, and it will definitely change the way we see the world, and we will transact with each other in terms of mobility. And that's a big thing when it comes to manufacturers, to car financing companies, to everybody who is in there today, because the value chain will change quite dramatically. If you look at these charts, these are not our charts, but you can see that actually the biggest losers in this game, as it is today, will be public transportation and the manufacturers. Those are the ones who are losing the biggest revenues and the biggest profits actually in this. And the winners will be the mobility as a service platforms that will take a lot of that business coming up. So in the next years, everybody will try to position themselves to be where the money is, of course, and that's going to be very interesting to see how that's going to play out. But what is even more interesting on this chart is that you can see the let's say the mobility consumption per household is supposed to go down because the cars will become more and more shared. And actually, the prediction is that in a pure play where we have all the cars to some extent being shared, a household could actually save 25 to 30% of their spend of mobility on an annual basis. That's a lot of money that you can use for all other kinds of stuff. And with these kind of numbers, you also know it's going to happen, basically. So seen from an ALD side or from the market, there's another trend, basically, that is very clear with consumers and also corporates today, that we want more flexibility. We want to walk in and out of assets. We want to walk in and out of our subscription for music, for television, and we also walk in and out of our car consumption. So subscription is becoming very modern. When it comes to cars and assets, it's a bit more difficult than a Spotify subscription, but that's a different thing. And you can see from going from left, which is the outright purchase, that is slowly disappearing. Let's say the ownership is going towards usership, and typically into today a private lease. A lot of our new business we book these years is actually private lease. And then there is this subscription model that we'll come back to. We'll show a bit on that as such. And of course, then there is the sharing bit. There is the peer-to-peer sharing. There is the car sharing that you know from the cities. And of course, there is the mass global models that you know well from Helsinki here. That is on the complete other side, where you actually have a full flexibility and you pay more or less per use. And that is driving a lot of new business models out there. As I said here, pay per use, the subscription models, and there is the platforms. And there's a whole range of opportunities for a lot of new players, and there's a lot of new companies coming up. Typically 1 out of 10 is successful, so we know there's a lot of them who will be disappearing again over the next years, but all that investment and development will actually help us to transform this space over the next 5 to 10 years. And again, if you take the mobility management, let's say, market or the mobility space, all these players basically are already involved to some extent, to some more or less extent into the market today. And as I said, some of them will lose out big, some of them will actually see opportunities in this market. But we will all be pitching basically for this market. There's companies like ours, like LeasePlan, like Alphabet. We have the rent-a-car companies, let's say the traditional rent-a-car companies who are already well positioned for mobility offering. They're not very good in transacting it, but they are there. There are the OEMs who have their captives, who are also very keen in terms of getting into this play of private lease, subscriptions, and so on. And if you look at the OEMs, just to give you a feel for where they are with the different business, you see some of the OEMs trying to position themselves basically to take the whole value chain, basically from designing, manufacturing, to be the mobility platform at the very end to the clients, and others who are a bit more, let's say, focused on the cars. And there's like 2 scenarios that is popping up these years, where if you take the airline industry, you know, you have a Boeing and you have an Airbus that produces airplanes, but none of these is actually running any airlines. And you could, to some extent, see the same scenario coming up in the automotive space, that you will find manufacturers who will become really experts in just designing cars that goes into different mobility hubs and mobility means where basically they don't necessarily own the client, and then you have the ones who want to be taking part of the whole chain. But it's going to be for us, if we look at it from an ALD side, to a large extent, we see this as a new opportunity for us. It's a much bigger market with a lot of new opportunities popping up, and we think we are well positioned actually to be part of that consolidation and to be part of staying, let's say, a leader of mobility going forward. And In 2016, we made a 5-year strategy plan that is then running out next year, 2020, which should give us, let's say, the capacity to stay where we are in terms of market leadership. And that plan was not really around what kind of service and products do we serve in what segment, at what price, and in what quantity. It was really around defining what kind of capacity, what kind of competences do we need to have by 2020 to actually remain where we are today in the market. And as I said, 2020 basically is coming very soon. We are writing our new plan, and to a large extent, it's about the same. We have built a lot of new competences. I will show you a bit later what those are, but we have built a lot of new competences, and we know to take us to next level, it's again about building new competences going forward. And it's all about timing, because basically, if you're too early, you die. If you're too late, you lose a few customers or markets. So it's really around timing of all these things. And what our philosophy is really to make sure that we have the different building blocks, building elements, to be the one who can actually supply exact the mobility that our clients are looking for. And we have tried to, for that, let's say, session around developing our 2025 plan, we tried to map out a bit where things are going and what is the exact timing of this, and knowing we'll be definitely wrong on lots of this, but at least trying to give us some guidance. And as you can see, from now till 2020, we'll start seeing, or we are already seeing, a massive shift from the outright purchase into the private lease. So going from the ownership to the usership already. That's happening in most of our mature Western European markets and in Finland as well. Then we see a next shift, which is actually the fact that the manufacturers wants to go direct to the market. I know there's a few dealers around here who is working in that space, but it's already happening. And by 2021, 2022, we think that's going to be the prevailing way of selling cars. We don't believe that the dealers will disappear, because the dealers have clearly a mission to fulfill. And we will always use the dealers for a lot of things, but we don't believe that the dealers will actually be selling cars for real by 2021, 2022. We are actually in a pilot today with Amazon in Spain, where we are selling used car leasing on the Amazon platforms, and it's actually moving quite fast, you know. So people are already, let's say, digitally oriented to do new stuff in a different way. But that's going to be a big shift as well in the automotive space, and we all have to align ourselves to that reality and organize ourselves accordingly. Then the electrification, clearly by 2022, 2023, and as I said, Stefan will tell you more about that. But clearly from next year, you'll see a lot of new products coming up, very interesting products. Perhaps the logistics around electric vehicles is still not there, and still some doubt about the residual values and the cost and all that, but it's coming, and we think by 2022, 2023, up to 30, maybe even 40% of the new deliveries will be electric vehicles. And then by 2025, we think there will become some real scale about the mobility as a service. The platforms will actually start taking off by 2025. We have said that after 2025 is the first step for, let's say, the autonomous driving or autonomous cars. And when we say autonomous cars, it's the level 4 and 5. Those are familiar with that. The 4 and 5 is basically hands off, eyes off, no steering wheel in the car. You call your car and you ask them to bring your kids to football the next day or wherever it is, 10 kilometers away. And that will become a reality. But that's, again, such a big thing that we actually we are disregarding, at least in the next 5 years, that particular market and what kind of effect it will have on our business. But that's how we see things are playing out in our world. You know, if you are a manufacturer, if you are a dealer, you probably see it a bit differently. And as I said, the last 4 or 5 years, we have been innovating quite a lot. We have shown that we can innovate very good in our countries, bring this innovation actually into a center of excellence and bring it to the market. And you can see that from this chart here, basically next year, we will be live in most of our mature Western European countries with a full digital private lease offering. I think it's already live in Finland, actually. But We have a car sharing platform that we have built, that we are rolling out as well. We have car sharing in Finland as well, so Finland is ahead of the game. But we have a platform we are rolling out. Again, our own platform developed in Italy and will be out in 10-12 markets next year. We have a switch product that helps actually the transformation into electric vehicles. So actually you can switch your electric vehicle into an ICE car when you need to go a couple of thousand kilometers either to the north of Finland or to the south of France. And we have developed, and that's what again Stefan will tell you about, a full EV program that actually accompanies our customers in the transformation into electric vehicles. And then we have right now let's say a pilot for a subscription model in Norway and Spain that we anticipate will be part of that rollout next year as well. And of course, all these cars are connected through our own connected car platform. And that's going to be very interesting to see what will be the take, what will be the reaction from our customers on all these new products that's coming to market. But with that kind of, let's say, suite of products, services, we really feel we are in a good position to take the next step in the next 5 years. And again, when you look at a transformation like that, it's very easy to get completely lost, to be frank. It's such a massive change, and it's very difficult to imagine what this is. You know, our investors, as you know, you might know, we are listed today. We are constantly questioned by our external investors. How about this? What about that? How do you position yourself there? And it's very hard to get this right. So what we basically have said in terms of trying to pin out our future is, well, let's stick with what we got and what we know. We say, follow our clients. So we try to follow the clients we got, typically corporate clients, and do what we are good at. All the good competencies we have around fleet management. Fleet management will be the core of any mobility hub in the future. So it's centric, or let's say we are car-centric when we talk about our strategy also going forward. And then, of course, we need to partner up with a lot of very good people and companies who can help us fulfill the full, let's say, customer journey for us. And that partnership DNA we have actually shown in the last years with many of our partners. We work with more than 50% of our business today is generated through partnerships. So it's a very important part of what we're doing, the DNA of actually being able to a partnership. I think Pekka mentioned the Nordea partnership we have had for many years and that we have been rolling out and developing over the last years. So these three things, together with being extremely flexible and actually discussing strategy, not just once a year, but actually discussing strategy more or less on a weekly basis to make sure that you constantly feed in the information you get from things is what we get there. And we know we have an innovation capacity today that is at least second to none in our industry. And we know we have scale by design. We basically are running a very efficient platform where we constantly can add more business at a very, let's say, interesting cost. We are the most widespread business in our industry, 43 countries. We'll probably be in 55 countries in 5 years' time. And today we are the partner of choice for our manufacturer partners, for our banking partners, insurance partners, retail partners. And clearly we do not forget our customers. Operational excellence is absolutely key to all what we're doing. And we think with those four things well in place, with where I showed you where we are basically in terms of product development, we think that ALD will be a very important player in this new mobility space. And I have to say that we believe that Finland will still lead the way because they're actually a bit ahead of the group in some areas. And we expect that the good footprint that Finland put on ALD Group in, let's say, 40 years ago and 20 years ago, we expect them to keep up that good performance. So thanks a lot for your attention, and thanks a lot for being here with us and celebrating this great day.
Thank you very much. You definitely deserve the standing ovation. Please, can we still ask one question? Can you please stay here? We have several questions, and I think we have time for one. Punctuality is my core value. How do you see the role of leasing companies in the era of autonomous cars? How exciting.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We ask ourselves the same constantly. It is probably the $50 million question. No, I think again, autonomous cars, if you look at autonomous cars, it's actually fleets. We talk about big fleets. And that's what we're doing today. We are top-notch in terms of managing fleets. We know how to own a car, to maintain a car, to service a car. And a lot of that stuff will, of course, be absolutely essential to these autonomous cars. So we definitely have let's say, a task to fulfill there, and we think we are one of the best positioned to actually do that. On top of that, we think that let's say the mobility piece of autonomous cars still have a lot of the DNA we have as well, that we actually serve our customers potentially through our own fleets, but also to, let's say, fleets that is actually owned by others, but we actually will run their mobility in the background like we do for our full service leasing today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.